All right. What's up, everybody, and welcome back. We got ourselves the PTR update. The patch that has been getting tested on the public test realm is being updated. Unfortunately, none of this is live on the patch. Hopefully, they get put on there really soon, within the next 24 hours. But there are some very big changes. They've basically said, hey, guys, we want to reassure you the Balance Council is a joint effort from the entire community. Your feedback is very important for the direction the Balance Council is heading. Upon analyzing the perception of the first iteration and the games played on the PTR server, we'd like to make the following adjustments. In the old days, when there was full-time employees devoted to StarCraft, we had a lot of messages like this going, we hear you, community. We are listening to your concerns. We don't get this very much anymore, which is why some people get very, very angry because they aren't reassured that anyone's listening, which is fair enough. Battery overcharge removal, guys, so don't worry, they're not getting rid of this. They're keeping it in. But what they're doing is they're saying, hold my beer, let me explain. They're like, look, basically, we're going to keep testing it. We know, but these changes could help. These other things that aren't putting the battery overcharge back in the game could help. And they're going to change the Cyclone Changes from 5.012 and 5.013. Now, people don't understand what this means. This means bringing the Cyclone back to 5.011 and earlier. This is bringing the Cyclone back to, you need to build a tech lab. On a factory, you can only build one at a time. They take 32 seconds. They have 120 life. They are crazy amount of damage output. They have an upgrade that gives it double versus armored, so it does like 800 damage versus armored over 14 seconds. It has a massive lock-on range of like a full screen. It turns the Cyclone back into a much more expensive, bigger investment unit to get, but it makes it much harder to get to and harder to mass up. It's much harder to deal with when it's kiting you, but it's nowhere near as massable. The Cyclone Changes they did make brought the unit back to play in all matchups as originally planned, but it also led to, it didn't create mech as a super viable playstyle, which it wanted to, and it made mech a little better for sure, but only a little, I feel like, right? The Cyclone. We did see more Cyclones probably get built for sure, but Cyclone already had its kind of niche spot in the matchup where you'd see occasional battle mech versus Zerg, where people would get like 4 to 8 Cyclones as this kiting unit to just kind of control the map and really be this very annoying kiting unit. Against Terran, you would still always get the Cyclone, and we will go back to getting 1 to 2 Cyclones every early game. Against Protoss, you would do it mostly as a reaction to Stargate. You'd get 1 Cyclone, and occasionally you do it otherwise. So it was already being used, it just wasn't being massed. It was a specialist unit, and whereas the newer Cyclone was more of a like, I can make many of these, and it was a bit more obnoxious with how fast it could hit as a pressure. And as they've said here, that led to reduced Protoss build diversity in the early game, as well as leading to certain troubles while defending rush builds in the Terran versus Protoss matchup. We think reverting to the old Cyclone, which was being requested from a major part of the community, can also improve Protoss early game build diversity and stability. I'm very happy about this. I've been saying since the patch came out, and you guys remember me saying this, if we're going to go ahead and get rid of battery overcharge, can we please just put the Cyclone back to the old Cyclone? Because this Cyclone makes it hard to open, the newer one makes it so hard to open Stargate. It's frustrating to play around. It feels like it's very, hard to defend early on, and it shuts down Adept. So it's not just that it can defend, because people were saying when the Cyclone changed, like, Oracles can actually escape the Cyclone, but they can't actually do damage, number one. They can't engage front on either, and the Cyclone is so easy to get. So the Oracle openings and the Phoenix openings weren't being able to do much because of the new Cyclone, but also you lost your Adept scouting, because a single Cyclone comes out, 50 gas only, no tech lab required in the factory, pushes your Adepts completely back to your side of the map or they die, and really limits the efficacy of Stargates and Adepts. So any sort of gas-heavy play for Protoss was really limited. This is a change. I'm so happy. I'd like to think I've been a little influential in this happening because I have been shouting about this, saying, can we just put the Cyclone back? This is going to simplify the early game a little bit and make it a little bit less of a tightrope walk for Protoss in the early stage. Give them a bit more build diversity and maybe make Terran be the ones who are a little bit more worried. They still got the faster building Raven, which is an exceptional thing that they usually open up with, so Dark Templar openings are still nowhere near as good as they used to be, but opening Adept Oracle, Adept Phoenix are going to be a bit more viable in those first 4 to 5 minutes. Next up is the Stalker is going to be reduced building time from 30 to 27. Stalker build time is there to help address builds such as Proxy, 2 Barracks, Marauder, which were very difficult to defend even with the battery overcharge ability. We think this change will allow Protoss to more comfortably defend similar rush builds, but we'll also closely monitor the consequences of this change for aggressive Protoss builds. I don't think this is too crazy a change. 30 to 27 seconds out of the gateway. Once you're warping it off warp gate, there's no difference. It's a few seconds build time. It will help you get those stalkers out reactively, which is nice. Now, what's funny, though, is the whole Barracks Marauder, this is kind of an aside. Protoss players have been complaining a lot about 2 Barracks Marauder. How the hell am I meant to defend my natural without battery overcharge? And I just want to remind everyone, because I've heard this from so many pro gamers and Grandmaster Protoss players, of really basic StarCraft theory. So we're going to open my Bronze to GM document, guys. And we're going to go to, right in the very first Bronze Silver session, some important notes, which some high-level Protoss players might have forgotten because they haven't ever watched Bronze to GM. But we have a standard 1-base reaction here, which is if you scout your opponent not expanding at 3.5 minutes, there's a whole reaction where you focus on unit production, you build a shield battery, and you try to be really safe. And you know what? It's going to die to Proxy Marauder, which is why we have a separate reaction if our opponent's cheesing us, where it says, look, if your opponent's 12 pooling or proxying, you really need to do a much more sharp reaction, where you just stay on 1 base and you make 2 gates and you pump units out as quickly as possible on 1 base. Now, you guys might think, what are you talking about, Pig? My point here is the number of players who are like, how do I defend my natural against a 2 Barracks Marauder? And I'm like, what natural? Why are you expanding against a guy who's built his only production on your side of the map? What are we doing? They're like, well, and I've heard this so many times from pro players and GMs recently, but if Protoss is 1 base versus Terran 1 base, that's good for Terran. Guys, his buildings are on your side of the map. What are you doing? And you know what they're doing? This is the most hive-mindy moment I've seen from Protoss players recently, where they just blindly copy what Hero and MaxPack's doing without thinking for themselves. I'm like, what are we doing, guys? Literally, if you watch any MaxPax and Hero game, they always go for the Nexus, they always go for the battery, they micro for 5 minutes, some of the most intense micro you've ever seen. They still lose 15 to 20 probes. They almost lose every single time, even when they succeed in holding it. And people look at that and go, yeah, that's the proper way to hold. Every time I watch that, I go, Hero is 1 misclick away from losing. This is the craziest way to hold this ever. Just take a second gas, go for a Stargate, and get the easiest win of your life. How's a player with 2 barracks on your side of the map going to defend a fast Oracle on his side? Not to mention if you just build a single Void Ray and just, get rid of his 2 barracks. There's a difference between a 1-base Terran and a 1-base Terran who's built 2 barracks outside your base. That's an insane commitment. You do not need to get an expansion up against this. Now, I'm not saying this is a bad change, but this is my little rant because I think recently there's been a ton of people who really are overestimating the transition power of a 2 Barracks Marauder. I think you guys need to go play some more 2 Barracks Marauder, try to transition off it, and we'll see how it goes. I think the real change here is the fact that if you don't probe scout and you get surprised by 2 Max Marauder, you still might be able to maybe defend, right? You might be able to throw together a defense with some faster building stalkers. Because if you scout early, there never really was a reason to expand against this unless you were an absolute god of the game who wanted to not just defend and survive and have an advantage, but wanted the game to be completely over because they're 2 base against a guy that's completely all in. All right, guys, so other than that, we've got late game concerns. So they've said, look, regarding late game, the Ghost gets masked too much. With the release of the BTR, we received additional feedback, pro gamers and community members, that Ghost power level seems to be too high for their cost and supply, despite multiple targeted nerfs in the recent years. Following this feedback, we would like to directly adjust the Terran Army's late game strength through this change. Now, I said this change would 100% go through. Do you know how I knew this, guys? Because I knew about the change. No, it's because literally I did a whole video about it. I have never heard more people shout for one single change than ever before. I still think lowering the actual combat power of the Ghost would be nice, just so it's a bit more vulnerable to getting sniped. Or its damage is a bit lower or something like that. Because you guys know, something I didn't mention, they actually kill interceptors really fast. They kill interceptors really fast, and Zerglings and Zealots. They're just a very well-rounded combat unit. Now, some people have complained that the Ghost supply change does nothing. I've seen this all over Reddit, as well as in my Twitch chat today. They go, this helps against Zerg, where people build 20 to 25 Ghosts. But against Protoss, you just have 3 Ghosts. They EMP the entire Protoss army. So who cares? Oh, you're going to have 3 less Marines? Now, guys, we've got to be a little bit more realistic. You're correct. This is a bigger nerf to late game Terran versus Zerg than Terran versus Protoss. But let's be honest, you don't build 3 Ghosts versus Protoss. Oh, well, 5 then. 5 Ghosts. It's 5 supply less. It doesn't matter, Pig. Guys, it's more than 5. If the Protoss is using High Templar and not just clumping them up for the EMP and spreading their army out and there's back and forth fighting, often Terran ends up with 10 to 15 ghosts, right, in the late game. Occasionally more than that, but I'd say 10 to 15 is usually the maxed out sweet spot for most Terran armies, right? There will be times where they lose all the ghosts and they're just quickly remaxing on Marine Marauder, and then they'll add the ghosts a little bit later to refill. But generally speaking, we're talking of, let's say, a 10 supply less at max. Now, so that's still quite big. That really does matter, guys. And even in the mid game, it does make a difference. People are saying, well, it makes no difference in the game. It still does. If you have 5 ghosts, you have to build 5/8 of a depot extra. That means yep, that's right, guys. That's over 10 minerals bonus per nerf per ghost. If you think about it in terms of how much earlier you have to build supply depots, you can imagine the ghost now costs like 12 minerals more or something like that. I know it's not very big, but it does make a difference. You have to build your depots slightly earlier. It's a slight nerf in the mid game as well. Just keep that in mind. The last point in this, which everyone's been shouting at me today, is, well, it doesn't matter because Terran just makes mass orbital, throws their SCVs away, replaces that with mules, and then they get more supply anyway. So Terran can have 30 SCVs when the other guys have 70 in the late game. So it doesn't matter because Terran just still has a bigger army. Whilst you're right that Terran can get a round supply a bit better in the end game than the other races, that is the ultimate end game. Terran has had enough map control and dominance over the game to build 12 orbital command centers. This is super end game. This isn't just late game. This is like, guys, we've been playing a 47-minute match and there's 14 bases to mine out on this map. Like, that's definitely something where Terran can get around it a little bit in the end game. It won't be as painful as it would for a different race, but it still does make a difference here. Overall, I'm reasonably happy with this change. Like I said, I don't think it's the one I would have picked myself, but I think it's fine. And I think the most important thing is that it shows the Balance Council is listening to the community, and the community does actually have input on what changes go through. All right, guys, next one. Mothership no longer can be targeted by Abduct. We received strong community feedback about this change since the Mothership was made untargetable by Neuroparasite. With the changes back to the 400 cost 8 supply Mothership, we'd like to test this idea to make the Mothership less fragile in the Zerg vs Protoss matchup. Now, this is going to make the Mothership, it's not going to affect it against Terran at all. Mothership does not have Vortex anymore. It just has Time Warp and Cloaking Field. Assuming Zerg keeps Overseers around in their army, I don't really see Mothership cloaking the army as being that painful. It's mostly for when she's coming forward and cloaking some Tempests so they can poke in and focus some units and pull back, and it's a little bit harder to maybe answer with your own, say, abducts or something like that, where you can't quite abduct the Tempest. You know, it means because you're not as worried about where she is, you can move her forward to tank a little bit more. She's a 700 hit point big girl now, so you're gonna be a bit more free with how you use the Mothership in direct fights, which I think is fair enough. I don't think this is crazy. I already saw a Protoss player say, "Oh, I think this is going to be broken," and I guess I need to see what they're talking about and ask more questions about that. For now, I think this is perfectly fine. I also err on the side of, if something like this is a bit too powerful, I don't really care that much. Like, I think I have a higher risk tolerance at the moment and more willingness to mess the game up a little bit here or there just to make sure we get meaningful changes. So I'm not sure if you agree. Some of you, I'm sure, are more conservative. Right now, that's part of why I'm there. Ultralisk, anabolic synthesis bonus move speed reduced. Now, this is really huge, guys, because if you think about the Ghost, we're talking about TVP. What about TVZ? All right, so because the Ghost is going to become 3 supply and you can't mass them as much, that does weaken turtle play. Now, to be fair, there was already maps like Site Delta where it was really hard to turtle with Ghosts. Why is that? I love that we've got these ads over here. I've got ad block turned on. I know this is aimed at all you neckbeards that watch my channel. I'm sorry, guys. I apologize. All right, guys, so the problem with Site Delta, or not the problem really, but the way it features is this is one of the better maps for Zerg vs Terran late game. The reason being, the bases are very spread out, so Zerg mobility is really useful here. You can kind of secure these corner bases and push forward and deny like the 5th bases and the 6th bases from Terran a lot easier than other maps. Clem was the one weirdo who was making Ghosts look broken on this map because he would actually be pushing both sides of the map with a spread of bio-ghost mine the entire time, guys. We're talking about bio-mine ghost, both sides of the map, pulling back through the mine, sniping everything, and he could dominate this map with mobility and aggression. Most players couldn't do that. Maru on this map would basically play like a momentum style where he'd never mass orbital, he'd just take more planetaries, and he'd try to just push and kill them in the mid game because he knew late game would be really hard for him to defend the edge bases. And a lot of other Terrans, if it went to late game and they tried to turtle up, they'd fail because you just can't wall everything off. There's too much room to cover. So the important thing to think about in map design with these changes is if we make the mass ghost less useful for Terran, we've already made the Broodlord less useful, these kind of stalemate tools, is you need to make sure both sides of the matchup, Zerg versus Terran, are really useful when you're actually playing on in the mid game. So on this map, you've got lots of big wide open areas to swarm your opponent, spread out bases, and lots of different counterattack and flanking paths, and that's a really big issue. If we end up making the Ghost too weak as well, does it make Clem just worse on this map? Absolutely. But more importantly, we just need to make sure that Terran can fight on these sorts of maps, because these sorts of maps already encouraged a ton of active play and they disincentivize turtle play. So let's keep in mind two things, guys. Let's keep in mind two really, really big things. If we want ZVT to be less turtly, we want more maps like Site Delta with big spread between the bases. That already is probably going to do more than any of these balance changes, in my opinion. Second thing is, if we nerf the Ghost, which we are doing, and you mass less of them, how does that change a more turtly map like Oceanborn, right? Where Terran is in the bottom right, Zerg's in the top left. Terran starts taking these bases, planetaries on the high grounds, just cuts their half of the map off, and just slowly creeps forward with like tanks and libs and uses ghosts for snipes and EMPs and stuff. Well, they're going to have less ghosts now for it, but I still think they're going to be able to play very much the similar style. It's just going to be a little bit worse, right? They can't quite have as many ghosts, but you're just going to maybe be a little bit more reliant on like libs and this sort of stuff. Keep in mind, guys, that the ghost snipe only does 130 damage. An Ultralisk has 500 and checks notes. 500. Battlecruiser's 550. Keep in mind, guys, the Ultralisk has 500 hit points. Now, it used to get hit by snipe by 170. Oh, whoops. And it would take 3 snipes to kill an Ultralisk, right? Now, an Ultralisk only takes 130 damage from a snipe, which means it takes 4 snipes to kill it. Now, you might think, was that really that big of a nerf previously? No. Not on its own. It was definitely meaningful, but was it the hugest nerf? No. They also made it so if you run away, you can outrange the snipe and it'll break, okay? So that's really huge. All right, so now, how many snipes does it take? 4. But our Ghost is now 3 supply. So what's 4 times 3, guys? 12. So you need 12 supply of Ghosts to one-shot a 6 supply Ultra. Is that bad? Ghosts are useless now. No, they're still going to be good for sniping Ultras. But even more so, if you're out on the map on a Site Delta as Clem, and there's Ultraling Bane swarming on you from multiple sides, Ghosts aren't going to cut it against Ultras. You're going to need Libs, maybe Heavy Marauder, more Lib Mine Marauder, something like that, or you're just going to need to fall back to a more defensive position. And this is a fear I think a lot of Terran players are having is, well, the reason the moment Ultras come out, we have to turtle up and play Ghosts. That's what we do. And if you make the Ghost a bit worse, oh no, our Ultra's just going to run over us. So that's why this makes a lot of sense. The Ultra move speed buff off creep with Anabolic Synthesis is going down by 0.23. It's a pretty small change, but you can see what they're trying to do. That way it's the same speed as Stim Marines and Marauders to try and make Terran players feel more comfortable moving out of the map in the late game. Because at the moment, once Ultras are out, it feels really bad getting on the map with Bio. If there's no anti-air for the Zerg, you feel like you can do it. But the moment they've got a few Corruptors or something, you're just like, oh my god, Turtle. Oh my god. Like, it is scary. Like, I always have hated going to Ghosts in the late game because it feels like it slows the entire game down and you're just hiding behind planetaries the whole time and waiting for the Zerg to kill themselves on you. So even when it has been very powerful for especially the best Terrans, it's always felt very boring as a playstyle. So I think we're all happy to be trying to move away from it. I think we just need to keep an eye on, do we need to make Bio a bit better? Do we need to make Libs a little stronger? Ultras a little weaker? Keep in mind, the Ultralisk has been buffed a few times. It's only 275 minerals. It can push through friendly units to get to the front. It's smaller, so it can fit through choke points and things easier. There's been a series of buffs for the Ultralisk, so combined with these dual Ghost nerfs against it, I think the Ultra is probably moving towards being the core late game Zerg vs Terran unit. We'll see where it goes. Not saying it's good, not saying it's bad. I'm saying those are the big changes with the Ghost changes and the Ultra changes that we need to keep our eyes on. Balance Council is clearly aware of it, but I don't think this little movement speed nerf is going to make a big difference. All right, guys, so they've removed every single Broodlord change. This means, as far as I can tell, the Broodlord bug, the behavioral change where it wasn't shooting its broodlings quickly at maximum range and therefore not loading its second shot. It wasn't reloading for an extra 2 seconds, second and a half. That's gone, as are the reversions to the previous broodling nerfs. This means the Broodlord is staying completely in its state from the current state of the game, last season's patch, World Championship. Many people would say that version of the Broodlord is a paperweight. It doesn't do much. It's basically got one purpose, which is breaking mass siege tanks. A lot of people would say that. I still think it does have a purpose, but it's never your first choice. It's okay, this game's going to like a late game stalemate. I'll add some Broodlords with my Lurkers to try and deal with stuff. Now, is that good or bad? A lot of Zergs say, that's terrible. You've taken away my Broodlord. F you guys. Keep in mind, Broodlords are a very defensive unit in some situations. Yes, they were originally a siege breaker, but we often see it in a scenario where people make Broodlords and spores and spellcasters and kind of chill, and attacking into it feels really bad, but it also can't attack the other player. Likewise, cannons, batteries, carriers, storm, tempests feels the same. Ghosts and planetaries and range libs feels the same, right? So I can understand them saying, well, we're going to make the Tempest worse. We're removing the damage point buff. We're also nerfing the Ghost. We're trying to nerf all of these things across all the factions. How that balances out, I think there'd be a lot of Zergs who are saying Zerg still has the short end of the stick. Ultra Hydra Viper isn't going to replace it. Ultra Hydra Viper Infester is not going to replace, Tempests will still be useful. Ghost will still be useful. Broodlords are poo-poo head. And you know what? I don't have a clear... I think I would agree that the Broodlords are the weaker of those right now. Does that mean Zerg's dead in the water? Does that mean Zerg's really bad? No, not necessarily. But I'm just something we got to keep our eye on is this power level. Like, if Zerg can't maul players in kind of the early late game or the mid game with big mobile fast armies and all that sort of stuff and using the ultras, and they just hit a point where ultras fall off a cliff and Broodlords aren't there as an option, we will be going into a game that consciously says Zergs are not as good in endgame as Terran or Protoss. And a lot of people will say that's terrible. You cannot have this in an RTS. I'm going to go out there and say, tentatively, what if it is? What if it is okay for one race to be worse in the late game? Because I feel like if you go through most of StarCraft 2's history, there's always been one race that's worse in the late game. Or in a certain matchup, if it gets late enough in the end game, usually one side is favored. It's only really been the last maybe 4 years of StarCraft 2 where we've had like Serral, Trap, Maru, Clem, and all these different guys where late game has looked very well balanced. To be fair, there's probably a lot of players saying, what are you talking about, well-balanced pig? What are you talking about? Serral mauled everybody. And I'm like, well, that is true. That is true. Serral did maul. Maybe Zerg was too powerful in the late game. Or maybe it was just Serral. I don't know. I'm not sure. StarCraft balance is complicated, isn't it, guys? The Liberator changes are also completely removed, guys. Honestly, I have inside word from the people in the Balance Council. They told me that because there was such community cohesiveness around naming the change Liberator Girth, they said that they're not allowed to do that because Blizzard said it's a naughty word. I'm like, how is Girth a naughty word? It's a descriptor, idiots. So they got vetoed from putting those changes through because of that. I countered with a very reasonable take, which was, well, why don't we just rename it Liberator Cho? Jokes aside, honestly, the circle looked ridiculous. The Liberator did lose a lot of range. The sad thing of this is it's going to make it a bit harder for map makers to avoid those nasty lib spots. Does restrict their freedom in map making a little bit. On the other hand, I am okay with it because that circle just looked a little bit ridiculous. With Ghost being weakened as well, we no longer believe Broodlord changes are needed to adjust the level of its power. Okay. Other changes, Hydralist, guys. The dash ability, name is not finalized, speed bonus increased from 60 to 100%. It is now point targeted, giving the Hydra a move order to the target location. The tested functionality was too hard to make use of for many players, so we would like to make this adjustment to try and make the ability more functional and powerful. Problem, having to press an ability and click on the ground is way harder in my opinion. I'm sure like maybe Scarlet or someone understands this better than me. I don't know how left-clicking on the ground is easier than just pressing stim and telling you guys where to go. I don't like this at all. I don't think it makes it easier. I want us to all test this once it's out on the PTR and let me know if I'm missing something. I think it's just going to make it way worse to control. But I think they should just keep it the way it is. More importantly is the accessibility upgrade. This is still keeping it at Hive Tech. So you get Hive, you then spend 64 seconds and 100 minerals and 100 gas making the upgrade, and then it lasts only 0.71 seconds. Now, it's a buff which is necessary to make it at all useful. I still would prefer it be on Lair Tech potentially. And I was thinking make it double the duration. This is still such a short duration, even though it's a big percentage number, 60 to 100%. It will push them forward. It'll be a slightly bigger fart. Yeah, I still don't think it'll be particularly useful. I mean, I'm not against it. It's fine to get something in there that's only got a niche usefulness. I'm okay with that. I think what's more important is we need to rally as a community right now and name it. Guys, when I see name is not finalized, I see community, you have power, get your names out. I asked this earlier. Someone, what did they say? They said, I think it should be called Lunge. Lunge is more lore accurate. They had this great paragraph of nerdy explanation. And I was like, counterpoint, thrust. The number of moments I can have while commentating, it's either thrust or fart. I wouldn't mind fart, you know, because there's like a bit of gas that comes out and they just push forward a little bit. Either one of those will make me happy as a commentator. You guys let me know. Whatever you guys agree on, get everyone on board, keep chanting it, and hopefully we can get the ability named that. Lurker. Guys, Lurker health reduced so that the Disruptor can two-shot it. Makes sense. And there's a change. Lurker gets one more sight. Apparently, it wasn't able, even though it had the same sight and attack range, because the sight wouldn't always provide the full vision on a certain angle. Sometimes it says it would actually have slight inconsistencies on its attack range depending on angle. So basically it just makes the Lurker behave a bit more consistently. That makes sense. I like changes like that. I don't think one extra sight range is going to break the game. Perfectly fine with something that just makes the unit feel like it's more consistent. Because if otherwise you're like, oh, on a 45-degree angle, the Lurker has like half or less range or something. Like stuff like that's just annoying, right? So totally down with that. They removed the missile turret salvage, a change which basically made me scratch my head. And I rewatched my first impressions video the other day. I just watched part of it. And when I came across this change, I was literally like 3 minutes of me just going, but why though? I mean, it's kind of cool, but like, why? Why are we doing? Why do we need that? Why do we need Terran to get a few thousand resources back in a turtle stalemate game? Like, this is like one of those things where it's like, we can sell all our missile turrets and then build them else. It's just like we need a change to optimize Terran when we play a 50-minute game and the map mines out of resources. I don't know. To me, this just felt kind of dumb. And I'm like, whatever. They still want to test it on the sensor tower. The sensor tower is dumb. It's so short range now that I don't think it matters. My big concern here is they have not mentioned the color of the sensor tower radius on the minimap, guys. They changed it in this patch. So rather than being a very clear white line, the sensor tower, it's garbage now. It's like, it's team colored and it's so thin you can't see it. They need to fix that before it goes to the live game. Like, this is, you cannot be putting the sensor tower in with that crap. It just looks bad on the minimap. I hate it. I really dislike it. Just leave it the same as it was. That being said, guys, they did remove team color from the PTR update too, thankfully. Thank you, Omniskeptic, for the update. Appreciate that, dude. Thank you. It looked really bad. Sensor towers themselves, I don't care if they salvage, guys. Sensor towers have such a short range and are so cheap now. I just don't care. Whatever. It's fine. Blue Flame Change removed. I'm a little sad about Blue Flame Change being removed, guys, because it would have been cool to see Blue Flame be a bit more of an option here or there. I don't really see it being the biggest issue. I think they could have left this in because Blue Flame, it's good versus drones. It doesn't change anything with the Zergling interaction. But basically they're saying, look, we're removing the Spinecrawler change as well, which means it doesn't get the +5 damage, doesn't get the 4 seconds off its build time. We're worried about 12 pool drone rushes. And because spines aren't getting buffed and the queens are more expensive, we're just like, look, we don't want Zerg to get stuck on roach-based openings. We want Zerg to feel like they can open Ling Bane and not just get surprised by 2 factory Blue Flame and struggle because they've only got 6 queens and they're relying on Zerglings more. And Zerglings are always weak versus Blue Flame. So because this would incentivize Blue Flame even more, because once they get past the Zerglings, they kill the drones so quickly, they're saying we're going to revert it. At first, I was like, oh, I kind of like the new toy of the Blue Flame being back. I love the Blue Flame two-shotting SCVs. For me, there was just this sort of karmic justice of Terran players having to deal with their workers getting two-shot as well, which I don't need to shout. Sorry, guys. It's just too many times where like you're playing TVT and you're like, oh, I want to do a Blue Flame drop. You're like, oh, I need 1 extra Hellion to kill SCVs. I want to do a Widowmine drop. In TVT, you need Widowmine shot doesn't kill SCVs with the splash damage. You're like, damn it. I kind of liked the idea of TVT involving blue flame drops into mech, but it is what it is. All right, so with the full updated changelog now, guys, obviously a lot of the other changes that they didn't mention above are still here, which means Tempest did have its damage point removed. It's still reduced supply, but it does lose air attack range. I worry that long-term, we might worry that the range reduction is bigger than we realize, because I feel like range reductions, we only really see when players are optimally microing just how good range is. And you don't see that in the few test games we've had so far. We'll keep our eyes on it and see. The supply reduction definitely helps a lot. Immortals staying nerfed. This is very sad for me. My Immortals shoot a bit slower. I keep stutter stepping them wrong because my muscle memory is different for it. And it just weakens the maxed out Protoss army. Especially this is focused on Zerg. And I feel like the issue here, why this change has gone through, is a lot of European Zergs really want the Protoss to not just build such a powerful death ball. And I totally agree. It's so frustrating to play against. On the other hand, whenever I watch Dark and Rogue and a few of these other Korean Zergs, the mid game is just so scary for the Protoss that I don't particularly like this change. It feels like if Zerg is playing sneaky and tricky and you know, doing all this tricky stuff, it feels like it's really hard to figure out what they're doing. And I think there are a lot of high-level Zergs who are maybe looking a little bit more towards, we want an algorithm to win ZVP, and I don't think that's fair when you think about the production. The way production works in Zerg versus Protoss is that Protoss has counters to all of the Zerg units, but they take a lot longer to build up. So you really need to figure out what the Zerg's doing and build the right units. And if you get surprised, often you're not ready, and the Zerg can kind of attack multiple areas with better mobility, tech switches, and kind of catch you off and do big moves. Part of the reason this is also complicated is because of the 12 worker start in Legacy of the Void, players get to 4 bases so quickly that Zerg tech switches are insane. In that you're just like, here's 25 Mutalisks at once. And if I hit my Spire, it can just kill you, right? And we see this a lot in pro play. But on the other hand, if the Protoss figures out what's happening, they've got a 4-base economy already, and they're like, instantly make like 6 Phoenix and some cannons and batteries and all this sort of stuff. So, and the mutas can fall flat. So I think a lot of Zergs don't like that it feels like the strategies that make Protoss feel weak are also all giant all-in gambles. On the other hand, I don't know if there's a way around that with the way Protoss is designed, where Protoss has such good units once they build up into these bigger armies later on, but also is very vulnerable in the building up phase if they can't figure out exactly what Zerg's doing. I mean, how many times do we see Dark? He gets scouted going for a Nidus Worm, and then he just holds the drone key down and somehow ends up ahead in the 5-base versus 4-base stage because the Protoss overreacted so hard and he just canceled the all-in he was going for. Or we see someone go for a Spire and hide it and bam, 20 mutas fly in and kill them. So ZVP is a very weird balancing act because Zerg will have like this whole series of lethal timings in the mid-game, but committing to them means really committing, and if they don't work, you are basically saying I'm dead in the later game. So this change is looking to make Zerg have the ability to fight Protoss at max out a bit better. Whether you like that or don't like that is up to you. I personally feel like we probably don't need this change. I would get rid of it personally. Yeah. Maybe make the Prism 25 minerals cheaper as well to go. Just give, I don't know. I just don't like it. I don't know. I can't really explain it other than I just don't like it. But I understand where the players are coming from, where they're worried about the Protoss strength in the PvZ matchup, which, by the way, has been a very balanced matchup. I feel like PvZ on ladder, a lot of pro games. Unfortunately, Serral always beats Hero. Hero always beats Raynor. So you get this really weird... And Dark beats everyone that's like, what? Not Hero as well, right? It's like weird. Like Raynor and Dark beat every Protoss that's not Hero. Like I guess Max Pax is 50-50 with Dark. It's like a weird thing because like definitely it's so weird. It's very weird to look at ZVP right now. It's pretty balanced, but I would get rid of this if I was in charge of it. You guys let me know what you think. All right, the Disruptor, guys. Purification Nova is radius back increased, which is great, but they're keeping the damage reduction and it's still a 4 supply unit. I would say this is a nerf to the Disruptor. As much as I've loved the radius and it's really helped me hit more targets in PvT, it's a big nerf in PvZ where the Disruptor was already not very well used. I think it was a great unit in the matchup in a niche situation, building a few of them against Lurkers or Mass Roach, where it had its nice role. It's much weaker versus Roaches, leaving them on 45 hit points now. It leaves a Stimmed Marauder on 5 hit points as well. And this is an interesting one. Yeah, this is. I also am erring on the side of like, do we need to have these couple of nerfs in here? Because it's kind of cool. We get the Mothership not targeted by Abduct. The energy ability is great. The reversion on the Cyclone could really help in early game PvT. But at the end of the day, like I'm really curious to hear all of your thoughts. Do we still feel like even though these changes are quite nice, Ghost is nerfed and that sort of stuff, are people still worried about the power level? Because that's where I would be worried in terms of like, I look at the patch overall and I go, there's definitely been addressing what the community's concerns have been in specific things. Mothership not getting abducted, Ghost getting nerfed, Cyclone getting reverted, but there hasn't necessarily been so much change on these other approaches and these other changes. So I think there might be some people like, see, they're not really changing the existing changes that much. They're just adding other changes. Balance council's inflexible. They just want to do the same things. Fair criticism, I think. I think that's a fair criticism. We'll see how it goes. Can't wait to test and see these games. I'll have obviously a lot more analysis in a few days when I see more. We've still got all the other changes for Terran guys. PF down 1 armor, salvage change, sense tower reduction, depot drop is still in there. Thor Rex carriers, someone told me, by the way, guys. I still haven't seen the Thor in action with its explosive payload. It's way shorter range, but apparently it 2 shots interceptors in a pretty big splash now. So apparently it's actually awesome at fighting carriers in splash damage mode, which is not what I thought we'd ever be getting. Can't wait to see that 6 months from now, the first time we actually see carriers versus Thors. Also, Thors are way better versus disruptors, because they take 4 disruptor shots now, whereas they used to only take 3 disruptor shots before. Yeah. Zerg Queen, cost increased from 150, hatchery reduced, Spore Crawler. They're keeping the Spore Crawler, guys. I don't know how you all feel about this. I've been playing a bunch of PvZ today, and I basically just avoid fighting in Spore Crawler range. I do a lot of stasis trap spam and a lot of just harassing drones between the bases and the ones that are on the gas. I think it's actually not that bad the more I play with it, but I really need to watch a lot of pro high-level PvZs to truly see the impact of this. I really need to see those. So I'm still reserving judgment on this. My inclination was still make it 17 damage or 18 damage. Take it from 11 shots to kill an Oracle down to 10. Instead, they're taking it from 11 down to 8, which is a massive, massive boost. So we'll see how it goes over time. And obviously then there's just the Hydra upgrade, Infesta, Shroud, Ultralisk, push priority, and guys, the biggest one, which I didn't realize, they fixed an issue where Blinding Cloud caused certain melee unit attacks to be more easily cancelled. This is the bug that has been in the game since Blinding Cloud came in over a decade ago, or literally over 11 years ago. No one even knew was in the game until recently. I literally just found this out the other day. What was happening is my Ultras and Zerglings, when they were underneath the Blinding Cloud, if they went to attack and the enemy unit would move away even a little bit, the Ultra would just go, oh, I can't complete my attack. Oh, I can't complete my attack. Whereas normally they have a thing called range slop where they can actually connect with that target. Omniskeptics explained the entire thing to me, has done some little Twitter posts and videos about it as well. So I can go over that in a future video and we can talk about the changes they're doing to fix that and some potential unforeseen circumstances and consequences of that could cause some very edge case issues. So that's going to be really interesting. For me, this is crazy because the number of times I have attacked an Immortal army or a Marauder army with Ultras from one side, and it's felt like my Ultras didn't land a single hit unless I sandwiched them from 2 sides so they couldn't move, was insane. And now I find out that I'm not just... I was gaslit by the game. Yeah, it wasn't just that, man, Ultras are bad, man, Immortals are good, or Marauders are good. No, there was a reason why I had such drastically different results. And I had in my brain, like it's burnt into my brain, even with a Blinding Cloud, the opponent's just going to start a step away. It's not good. Ultras plus Blinding Cloud is only good if you sandwich. Now I know there's an actual reason why. So this is kind of I'm like, 11 years! 11 years! Poorly implemented from the start. And there's mysteries like, anyway, we'll rant about that in another video. For now, guys, I think this is overall a really good set of changes. I think they're showing they're listening to the community with things like the Ghost supply change, and I can't wait to see what comes of it. You guys let me know your thoughts as well. I do feel like maybe with a few of those Protoss nerfs coming through, I think a few Protoss players will still be upset with this. I cannot wait until this is live on the public test realm so we can get in, cast some games, and give you guys some more firm thoughts and analysis. For now, I hope you guys have got your eyes in the right areas. What happens to Zerg versus Terran? Ultra is going to become more dominant because Broods are staying very weak, and Ghosts are now getting weaker. What's happening with ZVP and the Immortals getting nerfed? Does that make the Protoss late game worse than the Zergs? I do think, one last point on that with PvZ, if Zerg is beating those Immortal armies a bit too easily in the maxed out stage, I think it's very bad for Protoss. I think Protoss should have a little bit of an advantage if they build a really high density army of High Templar and Immortals and that sort of stuff and get up to all that sort of stuff. If the Zerg doesn't have like Spellcaster plus Hive Tech combo, I do think the Protoss should have a slight advantage there because I do think it's a bit harder to get there, but that is of course just my opinion. Anyway, let me know in the comments. We'll see you guys next time. Goodbye and good night.